And with us now, our senior correspondent, John Miller, a former FBI assistant director and one of the few journalists who've interviewed bin Laden. John, good morning.
Good morning.
As Elizabeth pointed out, John, I don't think people are shocked that there were inefficiencies in the Pakistani intelligence service. I mean, what, if anything, surprised you in this report?
None of that. I mean, I think we got all that already. I think the most interesting parts of the report to read through it are the stories told by the wives and the children about day-to-day life year after year. I think you have to consider Osama bin Laden, figuring the Pakistani intelligence machine, the United States of America, never expected to last there that long.
I mean, this is a scathing report that was leaked on Al Jazeera. Then the Pakistanis shut down Al Jazeera in Pakistan because it really talks about just gross incompetence by the Pakistanis. But some of these details in it are really kind of interesting. That Osama bin Laden was walking around with a cowboy hat on
to avoid detection from above.
Well, that's true. And you know, in a way that makes sense because it's going to provide some shielding. In another way, if you really want to get noticed in Pakistan, walk around with a cowboy hat. And plus, imagine when George Bush heard that. He was walking around with a what?
The other interesting thing is that this house, that bin Laden had 4 separate meters for electricity installed in it, so it didn't look like they were using a whole bunch of electricity. I mean, there were multiple examples of deception, and yet the Pakistanis missed multiple opportunities to catch him.
Well, it seemed like everybody in town knew about the big house except the police, the military, which owned that town. I mean, that's the location of the Pakistani West Point, and their intelligence service. So now that we're at this stage of the conversation, we have to raise a serious question, which is, did the Pakistanis construct a report?
That was what I was going to ask you.
That fell on the sword, choosing to say we're incompetent and stupid.
Rather than we were colluding.
Right, which would be far worse and long-lasting. And you have to understand the Pakistani intelligence service. I mean, as you've seen, governments in Pakistan will come and go. But the ISI, the intelligence service, is really the permanent government there and the shadow government in many ways.
And then finally, I want to ask you about this also, this Associated Press report that the top U.S. Commander McRaven, Special Operations Commander, ordered that a lot of these files on bin Laden be transferred from the Defense Department to the CIA. How significant do you think that is?
I don't think it's terribly significant. I think anybody who tells you they're not doing it to try and avoid, freedom of information requests going to 2 different agencies is probably not being completely honest. But I think if you look at the bin Laden raid, it was a very unusual moment in American history because it was carried out under the intelligence title of law, which meant really the head of the CIA was the commander of the raid, but the actual raid was done by the military. So if it was an intelligence operation, all the files belong on the intelligence side.
Yeah, the Pakistani military also saying the extent of their incompetence, to put it mildly, was astounding, if not unbelievable, the fact that they allowed the U.S. to fly in and carry out this raid without detection.
And that's something that the U.S. went to. I was actually briefed on that operation the day after by the director of the CIA. I sat in on that briefing, and this wasn't simply just flying in unnoticed. The U.S. went to a lot of time and trouble to make sure that this worked, and can't get into how they did that, but the Pakistanis would have been pretty good if they did notice.
All right, John Miller, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.